What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's webinar. I am so excited to have my dear friend, Dr. Amy Wood, joining us. This is her inaugural ChiroHealthUSA webinar appearance. Honestly, Amy, I can't believe it's actually taken us this long to get this scheduled. It's kind of because this is like, I always joke, I know Evan, my brother from another mother, is like the biggest overachiever of all time. But in reality, he looks like a total lazy person compared to Amy. Like, I don't think she's sleep. To be real honest, she's like, I think I'm going to go back to school. I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to consult. I'm going to do all this fun stuff. And then she just doesn't stink at anything. Like, she's amazing. So she's kind of like my Wikipedia too, because if you reach out to her and you're like, "Hey, Amy, I've got a quick question," I never have a quick question, so feel sorry for her. And then she gives very detailed answers. Heather, Mandy, and I absolutely love her. Don't tell Evan and them because she's like our favorite. On here we always tell them that they're our favorites, but in reality, Amy's number one. Amy's number one. So. She's also, I'm sorry, I keep saying Amy, but she is Dr. Amy Wood, a graduate of Parker University, was in practice for 15 plus years, had a Bachelor of Science in Anatomy, a Bachelor's of Administration in Marketing and International Business. That's because, she's also a medical compliance specialist. And really and truly, I can say this without a shadow of a doubt. That's her background. That's everything. Oh, she's also, like I said, she's back in school. And her true passion is helping practices. And there's a lot of people out there who say that, but she doesn't just talk the talk. She walks the walk every single day. And I've never really met anybody who gives their heart and soul into helping practices, helping doctors be successful, be compliant like she does. So anyway, I can talk about you all day in the whole hour, but then nobody would learn anything other than that you're amazing.
Well, thank you.
And take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here for my inaugural voyage with ChiroUSA. So today we're going to talk about risk in your office. Some of these things might be kind of obvious, but then there might be a few things that you go, oh, didn't even think about that. I also run a company called C3 Plus. These are my business partners, and we do coaching, credentialing, we do billing, we do all kinds of stuff to help chiropractors and doctors succeed in practice. Just a little bit more about some of the things that we offer. We offer compliance plans. We come into your office. We look at a variety of different things. I do kind of talk fast, so if you guys want me to slow down, you have any questions, please stop me or raise your hand, ask a question, and we'll answer it and get you guys taken care of there. Obviously, the information that we're going to present today is not intended for any kind of legal standards. So if you do have a question, always consult the proper authorities and things like that before you run down some of these things. What we're going to look at today is office practice risk type, doctor, telehealth, staff, malpractice, and then, patients being in your office and how we can mitigate those and how we can work around things. And so the first time is practice types. There's many different types of practice types, anything from multidisciplinary practices where you have MDs, where you have chiropractors, where you have PTs or nurse practitioners or anything like that. And yes, I do see the word incident 2 is misspelled. So I thought I'd fix that. And then additional services that we may offer in our office as well, like telehealth or manual therapy versus massage therapy. What are some of the things that can get us in trouble as we're going through this? Well, the first thing we have to look at is multidisciplinary practices with chiropractic. Under Medicare, there is this little thing called Incident 2. And Incident 2 we'll get into, but it does not apply to chiropractors, okay? It does not apply to chiropractors. It's usually performed by the medical doctor, and the medical doctor will then delegate down to a mid-level type of person to be able to handle with the services that need to be done. So what is Incident 2? Incident 2 is the government's way of allowing under certain circumstances only for someone to bill under the physician, meaning that you have an MD or a DO and you have some non-physicians in your office, mid-levels, nurse practitioners, people of that nature. And what happens is the medical doctor will establish with the patient. They will see the patient on the first visit. They will establish the care that that patient needs. But on subsequent visits, as opposed to the patient having to get in with the medical doctor, they can see the mid-level in the office, and the mid-level would then be able to bill under certain circumstances under that medical profession. Keep in mind that Incident 2 is more of a federal, so it's Obamacare, it's Medicare, Medicaid, those types of things. Does not apply to your basic insurance companies that are not federal. And it is different than it is different than locum tenens, your fill-in docs, and we'll get into that. So keep in mind again that this does not apply to chiropractors, that the physician, the MD or the DO has to be in the suite, not down the street, not available by phone, not immediately, available in some other way or shape or form, but immediately they have to be in the suite. Okay. And they have to supervise the care that's being given by that mid-level nurse practitioner, midwife, or clinical psychologist, or things like that. Each state may have their own version of this kind of rule, which then applies to your private payer insurances. But keep in mind, again, this is federal. The reason why it is not does not apply to chiropractors is because the Office of Inspector General says that a physician is classified as an MD, a DO, or a chiropractor. So we are on the same level as the MD and the DO. Therefore, they do not delegate down to us. And we can't delegate to them. So important to remember that this does not apply so much to your private payer insurances or your commercials payer insurances, but they have other policies that they look at as well. So BCBS, United Healthcare, you want to review those provider contracts and those health plans to determine if you have the ability to bill under another provider in your office. But most of the time, they're not going to allow that. So if you knowingly bill under another provider's name in NPI, you could potentially lead to criminal liability and federal healthcare fraud. So you want to be very, very cautious in how things are going out in your office and who they're going out under. The person who performs the service is the person whose NPI and name need to go on the HCFA to be billed to insurance. Locum tenens, remember, that's going to be your fill-in docs. Those are going to be if you need to step out of your practice for a little bit due to some kind of illness, pregnancy, vacation, continuing ed classes, or whatever it may be. And each insurance policy kind of also incorporates a paragraph in their contracts that talk about locum tenens and how it's to be used. And under locum tenens, if you're a cover doc and you're not in network with the insurance companies and you're going into another doctor's office and you're going to fill in while that doctor is out of town, under that circumstance, then you could use the locum tenens and you would put a Q6 modifier on there and you could bill under the primary doc that's there. Okay, you wouldn't have to bill under the covered doc's license. But there again, you want to make sure that you read those contracts and really understand how that works, and you'd have to use that Q6 modifier to alert the insurance company that a fill-in doc was used. If you are to bill under another provider, like I said, it could spell very dangerous consequences like false claims, and you could even criminal liabilities and other fraud statutes you could encounter. So you want to be very cautious there again. Another thing that's recently come up in the last 6 months or more because of COVID has been telehealth. Now, telehealth has been around for a long time. It's been utilized more from the medical side of things. But when it came out, chiropractors were all looking like, hey, can we do this? How do we do this? How do we incorporate this? How do we help our patients? And so we put a few things in here. Here is the definition of physician according to the OIG, and you can see chiropractor is on there with podiatrist, optometrist, osteopath, and medical doctor. Of course, all have to be licensed in accordance with their applicable state laws. If you're looking for telehealth, one of the things I would tell you first off is to contact your malpractice company and make sure that you do have this coverage under your malpractice, and also ask what additional things that they are wanting you to incorporate into your practice to make sure that you're covered. They may have certain consent forms that they want you to use, or other forms that they want you to use. So always ask your malpractice for guidelines that they expect you to follow when doing telehealth. The thing with telehealth is that the same standard of care is going to apply as if the patient is in front of you via computer or if the patient is in front of you via one-on-one. There's no difference in the standard of care, and there's no difference in the documentation. And you have to document as if the patient is in front of you in your office. The paperwork is going to be the same. The consents may be a little bit different because you do have to disclose the type of communication that you're going to be using and the risks associated with that communication. So you'd want to make sure that you have an informed consent for telehealth. There again, your malpractice will probably have one that would cover you. So here are the differences in telehealth. So you have your basic exam codes for a new patient currently, and these are for a re-exam. These are the current ones that we use in a chiropractic office right now, and they also have the times associated with them. So if we take that and then we look at the telehealth codes, here's kind of how the telehealth codes break down and the time intervals that are associated with both codes via a telephone consult or codes via online digital, and then how much time is required for each one of those. When you're doing telehealth, you need to make sure that you use the appropriate modifiers and place of service. So right here on the HCFA form, there is a box. Typically, if the service is performed in your office, it's going to be an O1. But because maybe it's a telehealth conversation, it's an O2. And then you'd use the GT modifier for Medicare only. So right here with this 95 modifier, if this was a Medicare patient, then you'd have a GT modifier on there. If it was not a Medicare patient, then you'd keep the 95 modifier. So you want to make sure, too, that the platform that you're going to use for telehealth is secure. It is protected under HIPAA's rules and regulations. Now, one of the other big areas of concern, especially with COVID, is that they relaxed a lot of these rules in regards to telehealth, in regards to, getting immediate health care for different things that people have going on. Those rules will not stay relaxed. So as soon as those rules go back to being normal, or going back to whatever they're going to be since the outcome of COVID, then we're going to need to know that, and you're going to need to change the way that you do things. So just because right now certain platforms are good for telehealth does not mean that long-term wise you're going to continue to be able to use those. You need asynchronous and synchronous communication. So you really need to monitor there again, the insurance websites, their contracts, to determine what's going to be valid for telehealth in the coming months. And so here's the synchronous and asynchronous. This is Blue Cross's policy here in Texas, and it talks about what they expect and how to use it. So now we're going to look at office risks itself, and the biggest thing is, what does your office look like, guys? I can't tell you how many offices I've walked in and it's just a mess. I mean, it's just a mess. The front desk is a mess. Everything's just a mess. Maybe you don't even have the right people up front. Maybe you're struggling between employee versus contractor. And what about rental space versus sharing space? So there's a lot of things that we have to look at with those. So when you're looking at employee versus contract, the easiest way to go to the IRS website and look at the definition. This is the type of relationship that depends upon the worker and the business and how they perceive their interactions with one another, okay? Written contracts. The most important thing that you can do in your office to protect yourself is have things in writing. If it's not written down, it does not exist. So please, please, please have written contracts. Have written contracts with your employees, with your contract laborers, with anyone and everyone, so that everything is clean, clear, and spelled out, okay? When we look at IRS's definition of employee versus contractor, if they're misclassified in any way, this could be a big problem. It can mean back taxes, it can mean penalties, state, federal government income taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment, and more. So this is not something that you want to just kind of guess at and you just kind of want to throw something at it and see what sticks. This is something you really want to get a clear understanding on and make sure that you're classifying the people who you're working with in the correct manner as employee or contractor. So according to IRS, the general rule is an individual is an independent contractor if the payer has the right to control and direct only the result of the work and not how the work will be done. Okay. The earnings of the persons are typically independent contractors. They typically don't take taxes out. So the independent contractor is going to be self-employment. They're going to have their own taxes to take out. They're going to have to be responsible for all their own filings and all those kind of things. And so you really don't want to get messed up when it comes to IRS. You are not an independent contractor if you perform services that can be controlled by an employer, what will be done and how it will be done. So this applies even if you're given a little bit of freedom. What matters is that the employer has the right, the legal right to control the details of how the services are performed. So really look at who you guys have working with you and understand these components. The most dangerous phrase in our language is, well, we've always done it this way. Well, just because you've always done it this way and you've been in practice for 30 years doesn't mean that 25 years ago things didn't change and you just never adapted it. Or that last year things changed, and even this year with COVID, tons of things have changed. So we have to be up on all the information. When it comes to hiring employees in our office, we need to have the right fit. And 69% of healthcare leaders hire for a cultural fit, as opposed to having the right person with the right experience and what you're looking for. So culture is huge in practice. Yes, I agree, but having the people in the right positions in your office can really, really help your office tremendously. Now, there is a practitioner's guide. This is a national database where supposedly if a practitioner gets in trouble and they move from state to state, it's supposed to be given to the practitioner's database, and different states can go on and look to see if practitioners have any kind of bad history that they're bringing with them. Although this is a great concept, it's not really taken off as well as they had hoped, but there is a place where you can report if there's a problem with a practitioner. The other thing is part of Obamacare, when that went into effect, they put in the LEIE, the list of excluded individuals and entities. So everyone that you work with, it doesn't matter if they're a business associate or if you run a corporation, they're on your board, or if they're an employee or contract labor, everyone that you work with needs to be vetted against the OIG, Office of Inspector General's list. All you do is you go on to the OIG excluded list, you put the name, and it pops up something like this. You screenshot that, you save it to their file. If someone is on this list, what this means is that individual is excluded from getting paid with government funds. So if you take any kind of insurance or anything like that, and you have an excluded person working for you, you cannot pay them with any kind of government funds. That means you can't even pay them out of the checking account that you have all your money going into, because you can't let somebody know what money was from cash and what money was from government funds. So you have to be extremely cautious when you're looking at this. Excluded individuals can be anything from a felony, it can be a licensing revocation, a suspension, it can be not paying a student loan. So there's a lot of different things that could be on this list. I know of a chiropractor here locally that employed someone about 3 years ago, and she didn't quite work out, so he let her go. She just recently in the last year was looking for employment again, went to another doctor, and that doctor did the background check and found out she was on the excluded list. Well, she didn't like that she was on the excluded list, so she called the Office of Inspector General and said, why am I on here? I've worked for chiropractors and other people, and she basically turned these doctors in. Well, this doctor, she hadn't worked for this doctor in over 2 or 3 years, and he got a $10,000 fine for hiring her 3 years ago. So this is a very serious thing. And in fact, he got off pretty good because he could have been tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars that he might have had to pay because he's a large practice and sees a ton of Medicare. So if you're federally funded, you work with these federally funded programs, Obamacare, Medicare, Medicaid, any of those, and you hire an individual on the excluded list, you're setting yourself up for some big, big trouble. So let's see here. 2,283 individuals were excluded for defaulting on their student loans. So you want to know who you're hiring, okay? I can't stress that enough. Civil penalties and monetary fines, they can include $20,000 per each item claimed or service provided, and treble damages 3 times the amount of the claims to CMS for reimbursement. So you can see that doctor got off pretty light with just having to pay $10,000 when it could have, if he saw 300 Medicare patients in a week, it could have been treble damages and could have been, maybe up to $1 million. So he got very lucky. Vet your employees, understand who you're working for, and employees, vet your employers, understand who you're working for there. This is an OIG, Western District of Kentucky case where chiropractors were recruited for employment in the Louisville, Kentucky area in order to obtain the use of the chiropractor's name and NPI number to fraudulently bill insurance. So these guys, the chiropractors, 61 months in prisons for defaulting or for the defendant as part of this chiropractic scheme. So here again, this is extremely important that we know who we're working with and who we're working for. Your NPI is just as important as your Social Security number. Keep it close to you. Make sure that you understand exactly what is being billed out under your NPI. Make sure that when you leave that office or you sell that office, that you change your address with the insurance companies and you let them know when your NPI was no longer being associated with this clinic so that you can protect yourself. If you're going to rent space and you have extra space in your office, there has to be an agreement in place. And this agreement, the OIG put this out. It's basically, I believe, 2001, but it kind of lays out exactly what should be included in that contract for renting space. If you're renting space in hopes of getting referrals, and it's a referral base where it's going back and forth, there could be some serious problems with that relationship. So you want to make sure that you're doing it the right way, that you have everything documented, and that you're not renting space to somebody with the hopes of getting referrals, because that could be an antitrust or Stark law violation. If we look at malpractice, who should carry malpractice? Obviously, the doctors should carry malpractice. If you're in with insurance companies, you need to look at what the minimums that your contracts require. Typically, the minimums are $1 million, $3 million. If you have associate docs, then they need to have their malpractice. If you have independent contractors like massage therapists or PTs or nurse practitioners, all of them need to carry their malpractice. So you want to make sure that malpractice is current. You want to make sure that your office is protected. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And then we look at office risk. So does your office look like this? Have you looked underneath your desks of your front desk for people, or even the back office? Have you looked underneath that? So this first picture shows a chair, and on the bottom there's a little red circle. If we look closer, that's a screw. Guys, this screw didn't fall out of a patient's pocket. It fell out of the chair. Take the screw, turn the chair over, put the screw back in. Do you know how many offices I've walked in and I've looked at their office? I've looked around. I've seen arms about to fall off of chairs. I've seen their therapy tables that the screws have come out of one of the legs and it's almost laying sideways. These are huge risks to your patients when they come in your office. What happens if that table collapses? What happens if the leg falls off this chair? Now you have a bigger issue. So common sense says we look, we see a screw, we turn the chair over and we put it back in the chair. So, let's take a look at our office. Let's take and see if there's cords we're stepping over, if patients are having to step over things. Let's clean our offices up a little bit and let's, make it less risky for our patients. When it comes to treatment plans and cash versus insurance, you guys are in no better shape or no better hands than ChiroUSA. They have amazing plans. They have amazing things that you can do legally, and they can walk you through it. So if you want to give a discount to a patient, by all means, do it legally and ethically, and do it through ChiroUSA so that you can have it all documented and you can sleep comfortable at night. Also, write it down. Are you performing more services if they're cash than if they're insurance? Okay, do you recommend that if you're in insurance that a person uses cash over insurance? Because you can't do that. If you're in network with an insurance company, you are obligated by the insurance company to abide by their contracts. So you can't just decide, hey, although I do take insurance, Blue Cross, I'm just going to make you a cash patient. Don't do that. Make sure you have legal and ethical reasons for doing things. Also, this is Texas, but this is a prompt pay discount for patients. All states typically have a prompt pay discount, and there's problems that arise when you start to give prompt pay discounts, or even when you start to do advertising. I see tons and tons of advertising where we're offering $29 for you to come into our office, and that includes the exam, the x-rays, the adjustment, and all that stuff. Okay, well, that's a great promo and it gets a lot of people in, but it's not done correctly. What happens is if an insurance company decides to see that promo and then they see, okay, you didn't bill any new patient exams for any of these people, but then you billed new patient exams for these people, they're going to think that your customary rate, usual and customary rate is at $29. They're going to drop your new patient reimbursements to $29, and they're going to ask for money back for all those patients you've already billed. So here again, working with ChiroUSA and other companies to legally do this correctly is going to keep you out of a whole lot of trouble. Now, we want to look at who owns the records. Here again, it kind of depends on your state, but depending on what the contract says, if you're an associate, if you're an independent contractor, or what. So does the departing doc that owns a clinic own the medical records for his patients if they sell the practice? Not necessarily, unless it was spelled out in the contract. And remember, when you're selling a practice, you can't put in there, we're also selling patients. You cannot sell patients. Selling patients is a HIPAA violation. So you need to make sure that when you sell, of exactly what's included in that contract and what the future person is going to get. There have been court cases that have decided that the practice owns the patient, not the departing doctor. Do we have any questions so far or anything Christy?
Nope, nothing yet.
Okay. So here again, who owns the records? If a patient wants to get a copy of their records, they have the right to get a copy of their records. The patient does not have the property intent. They can get copies of their records, not the original records. So how long should you keep medical records? Well, HIPAA does not really specify a medical record retention requirement. Medicare does state 10 years. I believe IRS states 10 years, and each state may have different requirements for what they require. I believe Texas is 6 years, and then insurance companies, depending on, if there's any kind of information that they're looking for, it could be 7 to 10 years. So keep in mind, Medicare is the longest in wanting you to keep medical records, and that's 10 years. So how do you know independent contractor versus associate? How do they operate in your office? Are you sharing things? How does your office run? If you have an associate, then they typically are working in your office, probably as an employee. If they are not licensed or if they are not credentialed with the insurance companies, then if they're seeing the patients, then those patients and those bills will be out of network. They cannot bill under the primary doc of that office, okay, if the associate doctor did the work. So make sure that if the associate doctor is doing the work and you're billing insurance, that they are credentialed with the insurance companies. Otherwise, you'll get paid as out of network. If you have an independent contractor who's just sharing space, some of the big red flags are going to be who can market to your patients. Are you sharing an EHR system? Some EHR systems will allow you to lock it down, meaning that Dr. A can only see Dr. A's patients and Dr. B can only see Dr. B's patients, and these patients are not intermixed. So if they are intermixed, then you need to make sure that everything is specified as to who owns the patients that each doctor is bringing in, who's paying for the software, how the information is going to be stored and accessed. So if we're looking again, an associate doctor cannot treat commercial or Medicare patients if they are not credentialed with the insurance company. It can take up to 180 days to complete credentialing, so you do not have a 180-day window to see under the primary doc. It's whoever the doctor is that's doing the service, then that is the MPI and the information that goes out on the HCFA form. So let's look at risks in our office. Obviously, this year we've had more than our fair share of hurricanes, especially on the Gulf Coast. We have another one coming. So what are your preparedness? What's your plan for earthquakes, for tornadoes, for fires, for COVID, for anything you can imagine? Have you drafted a plan? Have you tested the plan? Have you created a training program for your staff? And do you go over it regularly? Whatever your theory is on this is not a debate, but just make sure you have the appropriate signs up for whatever you choose to do in your business. In Texas, it's a 30-06 or a 30-07 for conceal or open carry. So just make sure that if you don't want this or do want this, that the appropriate signs are posted. Make sure that CPR is available if you want your staff trained. If the doctors, make sure that you guys have your certifications, that you keep those up. Make sure that you have policies and procedures in place for ransomware. Ransomware is when your computer gets hacked. It gets taken over. It's like your credit card that gets stolen. You can just get a new one. But when your computer gets locked down and you can't access it, somebody else is holding it for ransom, then you have to pay. And so there are insurances on your insurance policies. You can have policies that cover ransomware. So make sure that you have that. Make sure you have encryption. You can encrypt your emails. You can encrypt your passwords. Anything and everything that you can encrypt, make sure it's encrypted. This is something that one of the offices that I work in, one of the office managers was clicking on United Healthcare's websites on her tab. It just so happened at the same time that the IP addresses were crossing, and her computer got taken over and hacked. And this is a message that popped up. Computer sirens going off. It was loud. She panicked and she called the number. Don't do that. What you do is you turn your computer off, unplug it, power it off, do whatever, but do not answer, do not call, do not respond to this, because she ended up paying them a couple grand out of the company's account. Here again, if you have somebody in your office that needs some kind of interpreter, be it hearing impaired, be it Spanish speaking or other languages, you do have to provide that for them. They do not have to bring that in. So do's and don'ts. Don't sell expired supplements, guys. If you guys have a huge supplemental practice, a practice with a lot of supplements and things like that, what's your policy in going through and making sure all those are still current, making sure that they're, you're not selling expired products? Yes, there may be some benefits to these products after they expired, but that's not for you to sell to the public, okay? So be cautious, look at your stock, make sure that you're not spending a lot of money and losing a lot of money because you have expired product. There is a mandatory compliance manual that is now required as part of Obamacare. This came effect under the Affordable Health Care Act. It is now mandatory. It used to be you could do it if you chose to. It's for all federally funded programs, including Medicare, Medicaid, and Obamacare plans. There are 7 steps to this: documentation, communication, enforcement, recording, publishing data, and maintaining these. And then the newest one that they've just added for high-risk people is fingerprinting. So let's take a look at manual therapy versus massage therapy. This is one area in your office that can get you in a lot of trouble, and it's mostly just by words: manual therapy, massage therapy. So when we look at the difference of manual therapy and massage therapy, the office risk for either one is going to be how it's presented. Are you calling it manual therapy or are you calling it massage therapy? These are two different CPT codes, two different meanings, two different things. Call it what it is. Okay. How do you bill it? How do you document it? Do you have a male versus female therapist? Are you billing it for an hour or are you billing it for 15-minute increments? And then what regions of the body are you working on? And then obviously the patient should be in charge of the massage therapy, meaning that the patient determines their comfort level and their level of comforting and getting undressed and getting the procedures that are done. And then what malpractice kind of things could you be looking at with having this in your office? Your massage therapist should have their own malpractice. If they're an employee, they can work sometimes under your license, depending on what your state says. If they're an independent contractor, then you'd want them to keep their own notes on either case if they're an employee or an independent contractor. Okay, so they need to have some form of notes. They need to look at contraindications, medications, the types of massage. Right now, cupping is really big. So, walking out with big bruises and, big red things that look like hickeys all over your body, the patient would want to know that before you did that to them. So you'd want to disclose those kind of things. Manual therapy is the deep tissue joint mobilization, manual traction, passive range of motion. It is different than a chiropractic adjustment. It is not the same thing. They are two separate codes. So do not bill manual therapy as a chiropractic adjustment, okay? It needs to have its own set of diagnosis codes that go with it to reflect the areas that you have performed manual therapy in. So here again, these would be diagnosis codes for your chiropractic adjustments, 1 through 5 levels. These would be your subluxation codes. And then if you were doing an extremity, these could be extremity diagnoses. So here again, the way that the manual therapy, according to the NCCI edits, bundled, they will bundle 97140 when you do it in conjunction with an adjustment, provided the adjustment is performed in the same anatomic region. Now that's the key words right there, anatomic region. So what does anatomic region mean? Well, there's two anatomic regions. There is the axial versus appendicular skeleton. So the axial is straight up and down, the spine. That is what we adjust all day long. The appendicular is the extremities, and we also adjust those, but that is a different anatomical region than the spine. So if we take that information and we put together a plan for adjusting the spine, and we use a different anatomical region and we do manual therapy in the appendicular region, which is the extraspinal region, and we diagnose it accordingly, then according to that rule, we are outside the same anatomical region of the spine that we adjusted. Now, Aetna's policy on massage states that massage should be considered medically necessary for prolonged periods and should be limited to the initial or acute phase within an injury for the initial 2-week period. So here again, each insurance company is going to have their own policy on manual therapy and on massage. Massage is typically not a covered service, but you'd have to ask in your state, your insurance plans. And when you go to bill for manual therapy, say we're doing the piriformis. Say we adjusted 5 regions of the spine. Well, the piriformis connects the sacrum to the major trochanter and the femur. So the major trochanter and the femur are extraspinal. Therefore, I would tag 97140 to piriformis, extraspinal, and I would diagnose point to those. So here are some upper extremity diagnoses, lower extremity diagnoses, and some additional diagnoses. And Blue Cross Blue Shield states that in Texas that manual therapy should be required the skills of a qualified healthcare provider. They do not deem massage therapists as qualified healthcare providers because they do not credential them. So therefore, having manual therapy or massage done by a massage therapist in your office would probably fall under the doctor's supervision. And in Texas, we can delegate under our authority and under our scope of practice. And so that would fall under that for us. So just some examples of what manual therapy what it is: PIR, ROSTI, which is also therapeutic exercises, ART, percussor, Graston. And then you need to also specify time in, time out, and what your goals are for wanting to get manual therapy performed. So this is a little kind of cheat sheet note that I designed so I could circle the number of units, understand the diagnoses, and why I was treating the patient for this condition. And of course, there's also new modifiers that you'd have to put on. The XS or XU would be that. So we kind of flew through that, but I wanted to at least allow some questions. We can go back over anything. Christy, do we have any questions or comments or anything?
We do. The first question is, do you integrate your ransomware policy with your HIPAA policy?
So yes, I would integrate my ransomware policy with my HIPAA policy, and I would put an email policy in place for my clinics as well. The email policy would state that there was no checking of personal emails on any computer that's in my office. And that is because the first ransom attack that we kind of knew of was Cyanide Hospital in California, where a nurse went in on her break and checked the email, and it took down the whole hospital, and they had to pay $70,000 or $80,000. So I would train my staff that they are not allowed to check their email or anything like that, that if there's any suspicious emails, don't open. That if they get one from somebody that they know but they're not sure, call the person. And also I would incorporate, putting encryption on my emails as well, and then protecting it through HIPAA. But everybody would sign off on that.
Great. Our next question is, where is the best place to get mandatory compliance manuals?
So, a lot of different people have compliance manuals, and getting it from a reputable source, they can be expensive. We do that as well. And I will tell you, mine's probably kind of mid-range expensive wise. But what you're looking for is not just HIPAA. Your compliance manual needs to be so much more than HIPAA. The compliance manuals we build are HIPAA. They talk about ABNs. They talk about documentation. They have all the insurance policies and procedures. They talk about things like modifiers. They talk about PT, and we kind of custom build it around those things. So a lot of people think that HIPAA is their compliance manual, but it's so much more. It's like how your office is going to run. When are you going to open for the holidays? How does somebody find out if you're closed due to weather or because of fire or whatever? What is your staff's policy, or what's your policy on your staff smoking or, having food at the front desk? How is your office going to operate? Those are all the things that are incorporated in a good compliance manual.
Okay. Great question. What is the best way to handle appointment reminders?
So appointment reminders, you can do a couple of different things. It means a lot of times your EHR software will text people out or they'll email people out, asking the person if they prefer a text or they prefer an email. That's an easy thing to do. Also giving, sometimes if they like to have cards that you can put multiple appointments on and you can hand it to the person. But typically people like to kind of have them text message or email because it's easier to find than have to go through a bunch of cards in your wallet.
Okay, so this isn't a question, but Amanda said, OMG, I love this webinar, and I could sit and ask her questions all day. Well, Amanda, we have 15 more minutes, so ask away.
Ask away, please. So let's go back through a couple of the things that maybe I just kind of skipped over pretty quick here because I want to make sure we run out of time. So when we're talking about massage versus manual therapy, I've had insurance companies actually call the patient and say, "Oh, I see you got massage or I see you got manual therapy in the clinic today." And the patients are like, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about." And they were like, "Well, did you get code 97140? And the patient's like, "No, I got massage." So the words that we use, even though we use them kind of appropriately the way we think in our office, that's not really appropriately for the codes that we're billing and representing. So that's why I say we really have to call it what it is. If it is your feel-good, fluffy, effleurage, petrissage, hot stone, call it massage. If it is your trigger point, your deep tissue, your joint mobilization, call it 97140 manual therapy. Because I guarantee you, if the insurance company is looking for something, they will call your patients. I have a client right now that they've called patients on, and they were like, oh, so you got this, or going back to your multidisciplinary clinics, oh, so you saw this doctor. And the patient's like, no, I've never seen that doctor. I didn't even know that doctor was associated with that office. And it's like, because things were not being billed correctly, they were billing out under a medical doctor who was never in their office, or maybe just oversaw a few cases. You cannot do that. That is illegal. That's going to get you in trouble. So if we look at this example right here for 97140, chiropractor performs a chiropractic adjustment, so 1 to 2 level. He then performs manual therapy to the same cervical region. Well, the diagnoses are M9901, which is a subluxation, and muscle spasms. So this would not be reimbursed in this scenario because the manual therapy was done in the cervical region, and the cervical region is what was diagnosed. But if we look at this example and we say the chiropractor performed a 3 to 4 level adjustment in the cervical and lumbar region, he then performed manual therapy to the patient's shoulder. The patient's diagnoses are subluxation, lumbar degeneration, intervertebral disc, adhesive capsulitis of the shoulder, and muscle spasms. Well, if you take and point the adhesive capsulitis to the manual therapy, and you point the other diagnosis codes to the regions you adjusted, in this scenario, it would be a separately reimbursed if reported with a 59, an XS, or an XU modifier. So any other questions or anything like that? Does that all make sense?
No question.
Okay.
I love when you started off and said, I talk really fast. I think they're to it.
So I'll tell you a short story. You know, you said number 1 earlier when you talked about when you were introducing me. And when I was in college, I worked for a personal fitness trainer, and she was a big Trekkie, a Star Trek fan. And so she called me number 1. And so that's how all of her clients knew me. They didn't really know my name. They just knew me as number 1. And so I was wanting to make a little bit more money, so I started my own business when I was in college of running errands for people who didn't have time to do their own. And I called it Errands by Number 1 because all her clients were now my clients, and they only knew me as number 1.
Oh, that's too funny. We just had another question come in.
Yes.
Clarify on provider performing service and billing provider. Our primary doctor at times has his patient see one of the other doctors temporarily for short-term care due to a different technique that is being done. The patient is still the primary doctor's patient. So if the service is being done by another doctor, should the billing be by the primary doctor?
No. So the billing is always going to be done by the doctor that performs the service. Okay, and I use the word doctor or physician because remember the OIG says that a physician is a chiropractor, an MD, or a DO. So we're on the same level, and therefore we cannot delegate down. The only time that you can bill under another provider is going to be if an MD or a DO has mid-levels or nurse practitioners or somebody like that in their office, and the patient has already established with the primary doctor, but then sees the nurse practitioner for a follow-up on blood work or a follow-up on this or that. At that point, because the MD is in the suite and because he's overseeing the case, they can bill under that. But that's only Medicare and federally funded programs. When you're talking about your regular insurance, nurse practitioners in some states can work on their own, but they do have to have sign-off from medical doctors. So that aspect would still be, they could use the medical doctor to certain degrees, but they'd have to look at their insurance contracts. If you have a chiropractor and an MD in the same office, or 2 chiropractors, it's going to be by the person who did the service. That's who's going to bill. So don't bill under anyone else, just the person who's doing the service, who provided the service.
Awesome. And that is such a common question that I hear. I'm sure you do too. So I don't see any more questions. Let me give y'all a few more minutes if y'all think of something else. If you are watching this recording, or if you're like me and you think of a question like 30 minutes after the webinar is done, I never think of them during the webinar. It's always later. You'll know how to reach out to me by email, and I can send those over to Dr. Amy to get a response for you. So don't worry. If you're submitting questions and you're watching the recording, just know that those are emailed to Dr. Amy to answer, since we're not here to answer those live.
Yeah, perfect. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. You know, I just kind of want to go back, since we have a couple minutes here, and let's just hit a few highlights. So axial versus appendicular, you know, this is the key to getting paid for manual therapy. Now, I say that, but Blue Cross is still asking for a lot of records. They're still asking, when you submit 97140, especially in Texas and some other states, it is flagged, and you do have to send your notes in. But if you can show in your notes that you did it in a different anatomical region by diagnosing it with the appendicular spine as opposed to the axial spine, and show your time in, your time out, and show exactly what was performed in the diagnoses that were performed there, you stand a lot better chance of getting paid. I'm not going to say you're going to get paid every time. I wish I could. That would be awesome. But they have been reversing some and paying for some of the ones that we've been sending notes in for our clients. And I'm trying to get back to that the little note that I put together here. Probably went the wrong way. So the thing is, you know, any timed codes, you want to put timed in, time out. You also want to show who did the service, and you also want to show what areas they worked on. So like here again, the little manual therapy note that we created was, you know, what is the definition of manual therapy? What diagnosis codes are we using? How many minutes are we doing this for? If you're trying to use manual therapy and you're trying to use it for an hour, you got to have a lot of documentation and a lot of reasons for using it for an hour. Typically manual therapy, you know, maybe 1 to 2 units. But past that is going to be some red flags that you really, you know, are going to have to answer to. The treatment that you're using this for, you know, increasing range of motion, decreasing scar tissue, joint range of motion, muscle spasms, inflammation. And then, like I said, additional notes are going to be who performed the service, time in, time out, how long they performed it for, what exactly that they did and they worked on. And so, and you want to associate this with your activities of daily living. So those outcome assessments. Associating everything you do to an outcome assessment gives you a much more solid documentation note and reasons for doing what you're doing.
Okay, so the last question is, what is the best way to connect with Dr. Amy?
The best way to connect with me, yes. So you can email me at Dr. Amy, so A-M-Y, Wood, W-O-O-D, and then another D for DC, at yahoo.com. You can also call me or text me at 214-616-3313. And then I'm on Facebook as well, so you guys can find me there. And also, obviously, go back to Christy at ChiroUSA, and she can always kind of put us in touch as well. And I can't say enough about working with ChiroUSA. I mean, the programs and the plans that they have and them keeping doctors out of trouble, it's a no-brainer. And there, you know, the beautiful part is that your patients are buying into this and they're becoming a part of this, and they can utilize this, you know, across the United States if they're traveling or whatever. So, you know, check out the program if you're not part of it, be a part of it, and just sleep better at night knowing you're doing things right.
They said, thank you. This was wonderful. Of course it was, because she's amazing.
Thank you, guys.
See, I love it. See, you totally delivered. So they knew that I wasn't just saying you were fabulous. Of course, I don't put anybody on the webinar series who is not fabulous.
Well, you know, with you working with you guys, I mean, that makes it awesome because we're already coming into a fabulous group of people, you know. So we love ChiroUSA.
So all of y'all who work with Mandy and Heather at the CHUSA office, y'all know, like, seriously, this is half of my text messages in the last probably month have been about their interactions and fun with Dr. Amy and her clients. So,
We talk a lot.
they do. So y'all know what a handful they are. So
I know. I miss seeing your guys' faces at all the seminars and stuff, but now we'll just have to get used to it via webinar.
I guess we will. Yeah, I miss everybody too. Just wanted to remind y'all that next week we're going to be talking about minimizing Medicare risk for peace of mind with Kathy Mills-Chang. Then the 4 key business principles for increasing patient loyalty with Dr. Miles Bodson and Holly Jensen, followed with a webinar with Dr. Stephen Krause. And again, we got webinars we're adding every week. There's not that many more before we're in. That 2020 is a thing of the past. I try to be positive, but I'm already working on this shirt for New Year's Eve that says I survived 2020.
Yeah, what is it like? They said, 10 years ago, if you had asked where somebody'd be in 10 years, they would have never predicted this, right?
Not really. Oh man, I look really bad compared to my profile pic today. Y'all forgive me. It's 60 degrees in my house at the moment because my kids like it cold.
Awesome.
So I'm wearing the blanket you can wear today, and my hair is all natural and curly in homage to my curly-headed
That's right.
my co-host today. Although my curls don't look as cute as hers, but anyway.
It looks good. It looks good.
Oh, thank you. So, you know, who knows what I'm going to look like next week. Y'all just never can tell. But I wanted to say thank you so much for spending the last hour with us. Y'all know I love y'all big time. And I can't wait to see y'all next week. Same time, same place. And in the meantime, if you need something, just reach out and hit reply to all the emails I sent you today to remind you not to miss Dr. Amy. Y'all have an awesome day and a great
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great one.